I took this amazing human being, trauma coach, psychologist, my client, Caroline Middelsdorf, from an inconsistent business that did around $10,000 in revenue per month to now having a business that generates $25,000 a month minimum while having a complete new offer that just launched for $35,000. Yes, I know that's a mouthful, but please let me allow to explain, because I'm gonna break down this entire case, everything that we did together and how I was able to help my client Caroline. Now, the best part of this video, the best part of what I'm about to break down is that we did it all without sacrificing her brand image, without spending hours in the DMs or her having to go on sales calls to close this, without needing to spend thousands on ads, without relying only on virality, and best of all, she just helps people the way she can best in a way that she loves and truly serves them. So yeah, let's freaking go. Oh, and by the way, we just wrapped up a new launch for $33,000, so we're gonna really unpack everything. Now, before we actually jump into the bread and butter of this video, going deep into this system, I want to make a very important statement. Scaling information is incredibly case specific. What I mean by that is that it works very differently for every single type of offer, niche, audience. Hey, why do I run an email campaign here? Hey, why do we have an appointment setter built into this funnel? Or why should I do a low ticket offer here? There are so many ways to scale info, and for a lot of coaches and creators out there, there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of confusion, which often leads to a failed business. And so I want to cut through the noise and make it clear that there is no such one-fit-all solution to scaling a business. But I have, after working with dozens of coaches, found a model, a fundamental model that works whether you have a high, low, or mid-ticket offer. Now, please bear with me, I'll explain it in just a moment, but I do want to break it down so that you fundamentally understand how to actually scale and grow an info business, whether, again, it's a high, mid, or low-ticket offer. Now, I know this because not too long ago, I shared a complete different case. My client, Nicole, who went from 0 to 70K in 120 days, we're actually at 90K right now at 180, so that's pretty fire. And we did this with a complete different offer, complete different niche. She's a business coach rather than Caroline, who is a trauma or psychology coach. But the cool thing about this is that we use the exact same methodology, the imminent ecosystem protocol. And that's what I want to break down in this video and explain really how it works so you can fundamentally understand how to scale info. So let's jump into it. Now, first of all, if you're watching this, you're either a coach, creator, info business in this case, or a growth operator. And if you're here, that's awesome because you're in for something good. You're here because you obviously want to scale your business or your clients. You're really good at what you do and you have a really strong passion for helping people, which I love. That's how I started and that's why I do what I do today as well. The biggest challenge though is your reality is probably that you have no idea how to structurally monetize a brand or even build an audience or offer. Or maybe you've been at it for a bit. You saw some success and hey, you started posting endlessly, praying the gods of virality. You're stuck in DMs and you can't seem to get any real paying clients. Or maybe you did get a few clients, but then, hey, you hit another plateau again. You can't really seem to get consistency out of it. In other words, you don't really have a clear roadmap to scale your info offer or your client's info offer. And this makes a lot of sense because, again, scaling info is very specific. A lot of people make it out to be very easy. It is not inherently difficult, but you do need the right approach to properly do it. So in this video, I'm going to give you what I hope to be a ton of clarity because I'm breaking down everything I did for Caroline, my client, and I do want to say this out loud right now. I want you to compare it to the other case I have of Nicole so you can see the fundamental differences, but how we're using the exact same methodology to actually make it work. And the whole point is that you're able to understand this model, this framework, and use it for your own growth. Now, I want to quickly introduce my philosophy here, the imminent ecosystem protocol. This is the entire methodology that I've used to scale both the business of Caroline, of Nicole, and a lot of my other clients. And it is quite potent for the reason simply being that right now in the info space, we're at a very interesting point. See, the info market isn't necessarily new, but there has been a lot of what I'll call here saturation. Yes, the opportunity remains and it's the same, but the problem is that there are so many other people offering the exact same thing that well, not all, but there's also a lot of businesses that have a lot of unethical practices, and our consumers are becoming more and more aware of what we do, of potentially what offers are out there. So then the question becomes, what's the most effective way to make not just a sale, but to serve people? And this is where ecosystems come in. Trust is the meta right now. Trust is the number one factor that makes it so that people actually want to engage with your brand and potentially work with you, buy from you, if I can say it that way. But how do you actually create a proper trust-based brand? And that's where ecosystems come in. The whole idea behind ecosystems is that we create such a powerful, what you can call it, brand ecosystem is the word I like to use here, that your audience exactly knows who you are, what you're there to help them with, and from that perspective are able to easily convert working with you. And here's how it looks like. You have to have an offer and audience at first. Otherwise, well, who are you serving? We need to know who we're branding to, what our messaging is, and what we stand for. Otherwise, it's very hard to create trust. When this is set in stone and we know who we're serving, how we're serving them, we have something to truly change our lives with, we can implement traffic. We can focus on nurturing. We can get to converting, closing, and lastly, deliver a good service. But if any of these are missing, then the entire system falls apart. Now, together with this methodology, I do believe that info business owners should have a certain focus within their business that I also translate to all the clients I work with. First of all, it's that their main focus should always be on serving their clients because we truly want to change the lives of the people we work with. Second, it should be creating good content that connects, that nurtures, and that ends up strengthening our ecosystem. Then, if necessary, remain a part of the conversion systems. What I mean by this is, now that wasn't the case for Caroline particularly, but I find it very important that a info business owner, if for example sales calls are a key part of conversions, that they do have some level of involvement for sales calls because that generally helps keep the conversion rate high in the ecosystem in that info business. Now, that's not the case of Caroline, but I do want to mention it. And lastly, that every info business should have a high profit margin with a lean team and low cost. Now, this is my way of scaling and how I like to approach info businesses. It's different for every single business owner, but this is the philosophy that I scale by. And I'm happy to invite you to taking this philosophy into consideration and to potentially applying it to your own. So let's take a look at it. This is Caroline's scenario. Now, before we start working together, let me share a little bit more about Caroline. She was around 600,000 followers, right now at 753, a little bit more, I believe, today. Made this a while ago. And Phoenix, her program, is live. We'll get into that in a moment. She also has a YouTube channel. And as you can see, she has a pretty big audience. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because you'll see that every single creator has different, I'll say it as prerequisites. Some info businesses have large followings, some might have little, depending on where you're at. There's different objectives you want to have to make sure you scale properly. In the case of Caroline, our main objectives by the time we started working together, which was around 6 months ago, we wanted to make sure, A, her business is scalable and sustainable, and we have a model to scale to $50,000 a month. Second, I wanted to have her solely focus on coaching and creating content. Now, this is super important because that's where her time is the most effective. Then I wanted to implement a high revenue model with 70% plus profit and an offer suite that, is supportive for ecosystem and around her brand. Meaning that offer suite, the ecosystem and her entire brand would be aligned with having a highly scalable business model. And lastly, I want to make sure that the current revenue of our business, while we were implementing a new offer, more on that in just a moment, would stay maintained while we're pivoting into it. And so these were the objectives we started working on. And as we progressed, we went and basically executed on them. Now, before I'm going to get started, let's talk about where we were before we got started working together. Caroline, her core problems were that she was basically doing everything herself. She was selling a $47 course and she was basically going to spend her time for about, I guess, $150 to $200 an hour on consulting just for 1 hour. She spent all her energy trying to make more content. Her personal brand was catered for views. And she spent hours DMing to make sales inside of her profile when she already had a huge following. She had no consistency in her business and, no idea how to scale here. But here's a good question. How did she even get to this point? This is really important that we ask. Now, let's take a look at her ecosystem from the model that I explained with you. When I take a look at what she had over there, her ecosystem, I guess if I were to color code this from green to red being healthy to unhealthy, I'd say her ecosystem was in the light green. She had a Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Actually, I'm going to make it yellow. I'll tell you why. Although she had the good, I guess you could say, channels to scale her business, the biggest problem was they were loosely connected. They didn't have a proper funnel flow. There was no real ecosystem mechanism behind it where they all came together and had served a particular purpose. Caroline was just posting content to make sure she posted content so people would see her and become visible. And yes, combined we had 1 million plus followers, but here's the problem. We didn't know exactly what the problem or desires were of her audience. We didn't know exactly what the pain was. Now, we knew Caroline serves people who are struggling with trauma, great, but what exactly is it that they're stuck in? Where does the pain come from? Where do they need help? And thus, as a result, how do you properly help them? This is the reason why she was coaching, consulting them basically, I guess you could say psychology coaching, I guess that's a way to frame it. Now that's why she was coaching and offering her one-on-one coaching on an hourly basis. There was no clear, tangible roadmap, no journey that she could provide yet at that time being, and people could visit her for $150 to $200 an hour, and she later on introduced it her mini course around July of 2024. Now, when she launched her mini course, because she had a pretty big audience, of course, a lot of people bought it. A lot of people saw so much about her content. And I'd say that her offer suite, though she was making at least 10K a month with it, it was in the orange. Because even though, yes, she had a mini course, Yes, she had one-on-one coaching. There was no clear value that we were really delivering. The mini course was catered at helping people become aware of their healing journey, learning how to start their healing journey through trauma. But from on the moment that they learned how to start and became aware of trauma, there was no real progression path that went further, which is also the core challenge of scaling this offer. Now, let's look at traffic. Traffic, I'd say, again, orange here because we had a lot of virality. She went very viral. She had a lot of people watching her, but there weren't a lot of people with great purchase intent. Considering the fact that, let's do quick math here. Actually, we'll do it in a moment. Now, looking at traffic, she had high virality, but there was quite low purchase intent, meaning there wasn't really a lot of people who purchased from her, even though she had a lot of followers. Now, on a nurturing perspective, how effective was the nurture step within her funnel? I'm honestly going to give it a red. Here's why. Although she was able to convert, her platforms weren't streamlined. Again, there was YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Content was being repurposed everywhere. Now, she had a lead magnet being a narcissism lead magnet. And they're thinking, okay, what does narcissism have to do with trauma? Yes, there's parts to it, but it wasn't very clear how narcissism connects to trauma healing, connects to starting your healing journey. There were all these loose pieces. And she had a Facebook group, but it was quite that. Now, the good thing about it is that it eventually became orange because she started posting more on stories, but still, it wasn't enough to scale drastically. And lastly, on the conversion side, there was an initial bump on low ticket sales in July, and the volumes of sales went quite fast. So initially you'd say, hey, that's awesome, she was making money, but over time that dropped, and she had to go from, hey, being a passive sale on a low ticket offer to basically spending hours in DMs trying to go, hey, yes, how does this help me? Please, I need to learn more about my trauma. How can you help me? And of course, as you can imagine, that isn't really fun. Now let's take a look real quick. Why this was such a challenge? She had 4% conversion rate on a low ticket offer. Let's do quick math here. $47 for the offer, where did I put it? Yeah, $47 for the mini course. Great. To do over $10,000, that means you need 210 sales of $47. To do that with a 4% conversion rate, you need 5,250 leads every single month. Now, I get you're thinking, okay, if she had like 650K followers, that's not too hard, is it now? Well, not exactly, but here's the problem. It is incredibly hard to scale that. A $47 offer that someone will only buy once, that doesn't have continuation because they're stopping after they learned how to become aware of trauma, just ends there. And also, you need 5,250 people every single month who not only are aware of their trauma, but now want to learn and take the step to heal from trauma, to even open the page to end up converting. Now, yes, hypothetically speaking, we could up the conversion rate and get her to 20K a month with a low ticket offer. The problem is, that's not exactly the best way to solve this right now because these people had a need for genuine help. And so that's what we focused on. And lastly, service. Now, Caroline's really good at serving her clients. I love working with her and she's incredibly good at helping people. So, hey, service gets a green for me. But as you can see, the ecosystem wasn't too effective. And let me show you why. This is how her ecosystem/funnel looked like. Now, what I mentioned, all of it was kind of messy. So at Instagram, where she had head talk reels, static posts, lifestyle engagement reels that went viral, people came to her profile and visited and they converted into a follower. Great. Now, there was these keywords being comment, start if you want to learn how to begin your healing journey, and she had to spend hour DM setting, or they would go into the bio where they could go on her Stan store and on her Stan store decide, okay, I'm gonna, I guess, buy the course or pay you $150 for a not very clear outcome that I can work with. And if that didn't happen, they either went to the Facebook group and there was a dead end, or there was, of course, the narcissism lead magnet, which I didn't add here, but let's say narcissism lead magnet, right? And that all was incredibly confusing because if you're the client and you're thinking, okay, I want to heal from trauma, that's what Caroline's good at, she's keep making this content about it, and you see this, basically you run through her funnel, you don't really know where to go. You don't know if you're going to go to her Facebook group and what happens there. You don't know what the narcissism lead magnet's going to do for you. That also was a dead end, and you don't really know how to be served. Now, this is the core challenge, and this is what we had to address, and that's why these objectives also were the case. So what happened and how do we make it work? Let's jump into it right now. Caroline is at a really good point with her business. We have succeeded at building out her optimized ecosystem with all the mechanisms working smoothly. I'm very proud of that. That's awesome. We've built a stabilized customer journey from low to high ticket, meaning if someone now purchases her mini course after they've started their healing journey, there's a clear path to progress and to truly heal from trauma, or maybe that's not the right way to frame it when it comes to trauma particularly, but there's people know how to essentially live as their authentic self again, which is an amazing, amazing achievement, an amazing way we can serve people. Now, we introduced introduce her new offer, Phoenix. I'll explain a little bit more what that is and how we did that in just a moment. But just for the sake of numbers and data, we launched and collected $33,000 on the first launches, and we essentially closed $37K. That means there's $4K in payment splits. That was in February. Phoenix now has a waitlist of over 1,800 people, and we just finished our second launch in April at $33,000 collected with over 75% in cash. And over 90 people are currently in the program. We're almost at 100 members, and you can say that we're drastically changing the lives of people because, well, it's awesome. Phoenix has done over 65,000 in sales in just 2 launches, which is honestly awesome with a brand new offer. And her entire model is refined to the point she's consistently hitting 20K plus a month while she's literally doing what we wanted her to do, creating content and serving our audience. And her life has literally changed, and I'm so proud of that. She can travel, serve others, and focus on helping the world. She was literally just on a podcast with Danny Morrell, part of our own podcast, Real Raw Authentic, which we've also created and set up. And this is all thanks to the ecosystem protocol and executing it the right way. So now let me run you through how we did every single part of that and how that actually ended up working. And here were the operational priorities to end up making these objectives a reality, and this is going to be a fun journey. So let's start off with priority number 1. I colored these, typically do everything in black, but just to make a little bit of contrast. First of all, we had to make sure that we knew exactly what problem we were solving by doing market research. Because hey, if you don't know what problem you're solving, you can't have an offer. This is the most common problem I see with almost every single info operator or info offer. The problem is, okay, I think I need to have this offer and I can bring value that way. But if your audience doesn't really want and it doesn't serve a problem, you're basically fucked. So we had to first create a good offer. Once we could create this offer, the next focus could go into building an ecosystem that aligns with the offer so that our audience would fully understand what it is that we can serve, and making sure that on every single channel Caroline has, the nurturing process would go well, meaning people would come in, they would know how they could get served, and they could get access to the right support. Then, once we had that, we knew what we would serve people with. We could then focus on developing the program and the infrastructure to scale it. We then had to focus on ecosystem conversions, meaning, hey, people actually would buy. And then, of course, the last goal is how can we make this into a long-term structural strategy, a business that has longevity, instead of just, okay, I did 30K, great, next month I'm basically back to zero. So that's what we focused on, and here's how that looked like. Let's start off with the first one, market research and development. Like I already kind of, because I prefaced it, I cannot stress this enough. Little moment of silence here for everyone who has ever launched an offer without having the proper data, knowing what their audience wants, and as a result, got effed over by it. Please, if you're watching this, you're scaling info, please ask for feedback from your audience. Please know exactly what problem you're solving before you go out and just put so much time and effort into an offer, or worst of all, try to solve a problem that isn't really a need, and as a result, disappoint a lot of people and potentially even unethically take their money without really being able to serve them. Why I'm saying this is because it's almost impossible to create a good product without really knowing, hey, the same questions we asked with Caroline. What did Caroline's audience need? Where in their customer journey were they? What support did they truly require? What have they tried before that didn't work? What price point would they potentially be willing to invest? And what's the best way to deliver this? I cannot stress this last point enough. There are so many offers out there that hit the nail on the problem they're trying to solve, but the delivery of it is lackluster. It infuriates me, but at the same time, it creates a really bad name for the info space where all these gurus are scamming. That's really where it comes from. And so, to be able to determine the answers to these questions, we had to take a good look at Caroline's current problem and current situation, the current position in the trauma healing journey of our audience, the outcomes they wanted beyond the mini course that she already had, the specific challenges that were preventing their progress, how willing they were to invest, and what level of commitment did they show to such a program. So the core problems we identified for Caroline's audience is that they had been bombarded with information and couldn't navigate their trauma effectively. What I mean by this is there is a ton of information, misinformation on how to heal from trauma, and if you don't have a proper structured roadmap, if I can frame that word, to heal from trauma, it is incredibly difficult. Now, I also have been through my own fair share of trauma healing. I was heavily traumatized as a child, so I have quite some experience with this journey, but this was very important. Second of all, we found out that her audience had tried oftentimes traditional trauma therapy, talk therapy, but the support was lackluster and they couldn't progress in their journey, leaving them traumatized and stuck within their own loops. As a result, because they were stuck in the repetitive loops, they didn't have the right healing journey, and worst of all, there was incredibly long wait lists for our audience to actually get the right healing support. So with all this information in mind, we had to now figure out, okay, with stories and forms, what is the right way to help them. And this is what we ended up structuring. If I took a look and we broke this down together, Caroline and I, looking at the entire trauma healing journey, we, I guess you could say, structured it as 5 phases. We have the unaware trauma victim. These are people who typically have no idea that they're even conflicted by trauma, but their life is affected by it, what I would call unaware in the customer journey. Then we had the aware trauma survivor. These are people who are aware that they are afflicted by trauma, that they have a trauma, and they're trying to go through it. They have no idea how to heal from it yet, but they're going through it. Then we have the actively coping trauma survivor. This is the person who's been aware and is now coping, trying to survive their trauma. We have the trauma overcomer, which was people who typically already have learned different methods to overcome their trauma patterns and are now on a positive note. And lastly, we decided the name for this group would be the authentic trauma survivor. These are people who have survived trauma and they've now become authentic to themselves, and they now know how to lead their life without any, not necessarily any dysfunctional patterns, but they've learned how to survive their trauma and are now living a more fulfilling life. Now, we took a look at her offerings, her mini course and her coaching, and what we particularly saw is that our mini course fell along the journey over here from unaware to I guess you could say semi-aware trauma survivor. This is the demographic of people that she could serve with that offer. Then her one-on-one coaching was the most fit for people who had already overcome or are on the path of overcoming and wanted to, I guess you could say, progress further into being an authentic trauma survivor. But there was a gap in the middle. We weren't serving this part of the audience. And with a mini course and a one-on-one offer, it is very hard to reach these two audiences unless you want to create another mini course. But at the same time, it's very hard to go into the deeper part of this journey for trauma survivors because of how much, I guess you could say, of a progression route that could be. Meaning there was a particular offer here, almost a low-hanging fruit type of situation with a mid-ticket offer, a program that we could offer these people. And so after doing some research, after having seen all the feedback, after knowing exactly what our audience wanted, we were able to create Phoenix. We created a 90-day trauma healing program. The reasoning behind it is that her audience already had purchased most of the time her starting program, her mini program, how to start your healing journey, which gave them just enough information to already become aware of their patterns. But there was a gap. Caroline couldn't serve more people with her one-on-ones, but she did want to serve them. So this was the most natural progression. So the key take here of this section of doing market research is that we found exactly what the need was in the market based on our audience's feedback. We knew we could help our audience. Now we just had to build an offer around it and finally structure our ecosystem and program to serve them. And that's exactly what we did. So this is why this phase is so crucial. And please do not skip it. It's not sexy. It's not fun. I know. But market research is by far the most important section to creating any successful info offer. Because if you're trying to serve people and you don't really know what you're serving them, you're not going to serve people. That's just how I'm going to frame it right now. So once we did that, we had to optimize our ecosystem. Now, this is a very interesting part, and this is where all the content creation, reels, head talks, all these things come in play. Because when you have an offer and you're very clear on what you're going to serve people, aka a 90-day trauma healing program, well, how are you going to communicate it in a way that this audience that has been following you for years now, or maybe even for a few months now, but that need your help are going to know it and potentially even ask your help for it. So that's what we focused on here. We went on all her platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. She had her podcast now, her mailing list, and Facebook. And we decided to create a structural branding and messaging around it. Her core message is that you can heal from trauma. And the way that Caroline really framed it is she's on a mission to help 1 million people heal from trauma. That is a beautiful mission, a very empowering one, and one that we can stand behind, both as her prospects and clients, but also just as humans supporting others. So what we did is we optimized the branding and messaging to make sure we cater to the full customer journey of our audience. No longer just, okay, if you want to get some trauma awareness. Now, we went into trauma healing. We did it in a way with content that positions Caroline as the respected voice in the field, creates deeper and more nuanced content. What I mean by that is it's no longer just, here's why you have trauma, for example, right? But content that really goes deep into the problems with modern trauma healing practices or misconceptions about trauma, things that really make people understand why they're potentially experiencing that and how they can heal from it. Now, that would also at the same time with the podcast help her build relationships with other experts in the field whose audience we could share from. And basically, we were able to create a very powerful lead magnet for new audience members so that we can consistently nurture them and can nurture our existing followers. And to give you an example of how our new funnel looked like, actually, let me break down first where our content went. Now, again, this is funnel logic, right? Or funnel theory, if you can frame it. But To build a proper ecosystem, we needed to keep in mind every single step of the customer journey from the top, middle, and bottom of the funnel. So at the top of the funnel, we created and we consistently used content that generates awareness. She had engagement reels that went viral, reels that hit a pretty large audience. Not always went viral, but reels that did hit a large audience within the trauma niche. And we also ran ads at only $500 a month. Yep, we had very high ROAS because, well, you don't need to spend a shit ton of money on ads if you know the proper strategy for scaling your info offer. Then we focused on the middle of our funnel on creating content that really nurtured. We had her long form podcasts and we had a good amount of head talk reels, as well as some extra resources that our audience could interact with, her stories, to make sure that, well, they know exactly how Caroline can help them. They know exactly what about the trauma journey is relevant for them. And lastly, we had content that converted. We used call to actions on our reels, call to actions in our stories so that they could sign up for the waitlist for our offer. This is particularly, again, speaking about our mid-ticket offer. This excludes for a moment the one-on-one coaching that Caroline was still doing, as well as her low-ticket offer, which was still consistently converting, because all of these played into the same exact customer journey. And that's why ecosystem optimization is important. If your ecosystem is not optimized for your entire customer journey, meaning, well, you're offering one product that fits to a certain audience and a complete different offer that's completely optimized for a different audience, it's getting very confusing, and we could not afford that. So we kept it clean, meaning that people essentially went from watching her long form content to being more engaged with her short form content, and again, more engaged with her stories and buying from her. And here's really how that looked like in the perspective of an ecosystem. Now, if you just remember, this is how her old funnel looked like, and her ecosystem if I break it down, right? And here's how much more structured and aligned it was. On the top of her funnel, we basically made sure that her core ecosystem was, well, Instagram. This is where people could see her, interact with her. Her stories are most lively. This was the platform where her audience was also the biggest and also a very effective audience. But here's the thing. Her ecosystem already had over 700,000 people following her. We, structurally speaking, would have a very, very difficult time converting every single one of them and being able to discern what is the most nurtured audience, what audience is the most aware, what audience will truly buy from us. Because there's 700,000 people. Some of them are unaware, symptom aware, as you know, with the customer journey. So what we ended up doing is the following. We made sure that everything was clarified and structured. TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all of it led to Instagram, where the moment that people would visit her profile, they would see her content carousels, her head talks, her engagement reels, and stories. People would see it and they would be nurtured and pushed down into the customer journey. They would learn about trauma awareness and learn ways to potentially heal from trauma. Now, then, when they did get nurtured, what we ended up implementing were reels with keywords. Post reels, as you said, keywords. For example, comment waitlist if you want to get more information about the waitlist on my upcoming program that will help you heal. This was also done through her link in bio and her call to actions, where essentially, making it short, people would be led either to the Facebook group that would then lead them again to the waitlist. So everything basically converged at the waitlist where people could get more information about a product. Now, what about the low ticket offer, Vincent? Well, sure. Basically, there were two types of audiences that I guess you could structurally break it down to. People who are trauma aware and people who want to heal from trauma. People who are trauma aware but didn't know necessarily how to start could buy her low ticket offer still. And with that low ticket offer, they would end up subscribing for our email, and there they would get an email leading them back to the waitlist, meaning the journey was progressively, I guess you could say, progressing, if I could frame it like that, right? Now, a quick little thing before we continue. We did run a retarget advertisement like I talked about. We would run a retarget advertisement to everyone who has engaged within our ecosystem to then go back to commenting a keyword to get again back on the waitlist. Now, once people are on the waitlist, we also used the existing email list she already had and converted them into waitlist followers. And inside of the waitlist, we essentially had a landing page where once they signed up, they got an email sequence that the launch is coming, and whenever we launch almost, I believe, bi-monthly, and now we're going into monthly because we have higher demand for the program. We're launching, and we would either sell in the emails or on a sales page, depending on the structure that we ran that time. And when people would buy and make a purchase, they would either split pay for the group offer, pay in full for the group offer, or would have a high ticket upsell with a one-on-one with Caroline. And once onboarded into the program, we could then downsell them into our membership, or again upsell them into a high ticket offer. And that's essentially how the funnel looked like. And again, keep in mind, this was optimized for people who want to heal through trauma. So that's how this all looked like. Now, the key take here is that we were able to segment our audience from viewers to actual nurtured leads. This is super important. Now, if you only have an ecosystem of 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 followers, it's not as difficult to be able to, yes, it can quite be, but it's not that difficult to segment who is in audience or who within your audience really will potentially work with you, who actually wants to work with you. You can implement a DM setting funnel. But with Caroline, with over 600,000 people who are struggling heavily with trauma, well, it's quite difficult to figure out who exactly to speak to help them out. So that's why we went for this funnel mechanism. The best part is that we consistently got live feedback. Because we were updating her ecosystem, we were literally able to see what people responded to the content. We could see how they would respond to the waitlist and signing up for it. And lastly, by doing this, we would be able to segment her Instagram audience from her actual waitlist audience, meaning people who really wanted to buy her offer, who really wanted the support on healing from their trauma journey. And so by doing this, we also validated the offer without needing to have it built in full and launch it, because we had literally 1,800 people sign up to this waitlist before we actually launched, which is a grand number. So then once we knew, okay, we got something to serve people with, we have an ecosystem that's running and we get a lot of leads, now just all we had to do was develop the program. And this is, of course, where Caroline had the most fun, because this is what she also loves doing. She's really good at creating this. But there was one central question, and I will urge you to ask this to yourself when you're creating any offer, any program. What is the best way to deliver value to your audience? What is the best way to serve them properly? And, well, how do we onboard our customers in a way that's seamless, has as little friction as possible, while still giving them S+ tier service? That's what my main responsibility was. And so we had to take a look again at the customer journey. Where were they again? If you remember, people were basically somewhere in this middle line. They were aware that they're surviving trauma, but they didn't know how to cope properly. They didn't know how to overcome it or to eventually be an authentic survivor. So we focused on this audience. We know we needed resources to help them move from unaware to aware to coping, from coping to overcoming, and overcoming just basically being authentic. And so we decided the best approach here, because doing this can be incredibly intense. So we want some form of pre-recorded content. We decided to create a course in that sense. We wanted people to have the right support along the way so they can reflect, because a big part of healing from trauma is reflecting. So we made a trauma journal. We knew that community would be very powerful, because people suffering from trauma often are quite secluded, and in a way, I guess you could say, they need the support to really heal from this. I had this in my journey as well. So community was a big part of the offer. And lastly, group life coaching. That's where feedback and healing together would become very effective. And as an additional method to helping people, we had the one-on-one coaching offer with Caroline. This is the approach that we decided to go for, and at the end, this is how it ended up looking. We went going with a 90-day trauma healing journey, where a split payment option where people, either for $250 a month or $697 at one time, get access to 3 months to the program, weekly live group sessions with Caroline, access to the Phoenix community, a digital copy of the trauma healing journal, and lifetime access to the actual course, so that even after the time inside of the program, they would basically enjoy, or not enjoy in that sense, so that even after their time inside of the program, they'd be able to access the modules if they ever need the ongoing support on their journey. And then, of course, there was the option for one-on-one with Caroline, which we made exclusive because it is a lot of healing required and a lot of time from Caroline. And this way we could segment with the audience that truly were willing to, and also that would reward Caroline for her time while still delivering an amazing service and not compromising on the quality that we deliver. So the key take here is that we found exactly the need within our market based on the feedback we got from our audience. We know exactly how we could help them with it, and so we just built the right program for it, and now we just needed to serve them. So now that this was done, we had a program, we had a good ecosystem, we knew what we were serving. The question is, okay, how do we convert our audience? And this is where it became really, really, really fun, because based on the operational components included, we had to make content on Instagram and a podcast that would pre-frame Phoenix as the solution for our audience. Stories needed to guide our audience deeper. We needed more lead magnets to make sure that people would get interested in the prospect. And then we would have to nurture our audience through our email sequences to make sure that they would actually want to buy our offers. And so there's a lot we did here. I'll break it down again. Let's go for it, right? So before going deeper into, of course, this part, let's take a little look. When our audience came into our ecosystem on Instagram, they had to be nurtured by every single piece of content piece and stories. Once that happened, they could convert into our waitlist. But on the waitlist, people will not just buy. People don't just go for a buying decision like, okay, I'm just going to buy this program because I want to do it, especially not within the trauma niche. So what we did is we built a wait list, and we did this very intentionally because with the trauma niche, particularly in this niche, again, this differs for every single offer, for every single niche, but a lot of people will not make decisions due to the fear, due to the lack of self-accountability. There are so many variables that play a role into this. And for that reason, we wanted to make sure that the right people who really truly wanted the trauma healing support would make the decision. And so we used the waitlist mechanism to build just a sense of urgency and FOMO, not in an unethical way, but if we do not drive urgency and make people make a decision within a time frame, it would be very hard for them to commit to their own healing journey. So this made sense from a mechanical and conversion-based perspective. Because then, well, we just did a launch sequence to convert waitlist members into the program, and emails and story content work hand in hand to drive the final conversions when the launch happened. This is amazing because it created a flywheel, right? Because every single time that our audience would see our content, they would see Caroline, they would hear about her product, they would see it pop up in the stories, they would see testimonials and whatever. They would continuously hearing about the trauma healing journey that Caroline's providing for other people. And it creates this flywheel where more testimonials means more support, means a lot more people really going for the help. And it was a really awesome way of just literally showing the value we could bring to people. So again, on the bottom side of the funnel, when people would end up triggering the automations on ManyChat, which look like this, people sign up for your waitlist, free lesson, waitlist, free lesson. There you go. There's a whole list of leads that we had consistently coming through. Then essentially after they sign up for the waitlist, we had to make sure, okay, we've got a whole list of people, 1,500 people to be exact. And how are we going to convert them now? So I theorized and I said, okay, what if we test it this way? If every single month we launch, we want a period in which we collect as many people as possible on the waitlist. Because think about it, people are going to get on a waitlist and they're not going to make a decision to purchase as well. You don't want them too long inside of the waitlist without presenting an offer to them. But when you're about to present the offer and you haven't properly nurtured them, aka objection handled or showed them the benefits of your product, it's going to be hard for them to believe in it and make a decision, especially when you're at the start and you don't have as many testimonials. So I theorized that we should have a collection period for 20 days, roughly estimated. In this period, we would get as many people on the waitlist as possible through our stories, through our content, through our automations. Once they're inside of our waitlist, it is our goal to nurture them, so we close off the waitlist for a short period. Then for 5 to 7 days, we would send specific emails with information on what's possible in 90 days future pacing, what you can expect from joining, what happened as a transformation to one of our clients, a lot of other questions that were common, how the group sessions will look like, how the program will look like. So our audience knew exactly what's to come. And so the moment we opened up our launch for sales would start dripping in fast because our audience knew exactly what's to come. They were well primed. There were few objections and we could optimize the sales. Now, once the sales period finished in 5 to 7 days, we did a rerun. A rerun here is a very specific mechanism, which basically the way I want you to look at it is people would ask themselves the question, okay, should I make a decision to join now? Is it a good time for me now? Maybe not now. There's a lot of objections and a lot of fear. So after the program had closed off, we decided to rerun it for 12 hours after a day, saying, hey, I know that you might have had a hard time making a decision, so I decided to open up the program again with a small discount to incentivize you to make this decision for your healing journey now. Now, after that one day, we would close it off again, and then we would have a cooldown period. The cooldown period would indicate a small period in which we basically did not send any emails and we didn't notify them again. Because in this period, we want just our emails to calm down so we don't get flagged as spam, but also just because the offer has closed. And then we would repeat this sequence again. We would start over, get as many people inside of our ecosystem, inside of our waitlist, nurture them again, and this would just function as a repetitive flywheel. Because again, every single time people see we get better results, people see that we are changing the lives of others through this program, they would create a sense of both FOMO, but also a sense of hope that healing is possible. And with a trauma niche, that is a very, very big thing to create. And so that's what happened. We ended up creating our program. We ended up creating a landing page that specifically was oriented during the sales period to convert, where we would showcase exactly what the offer was about, who it's for, the entire structure of the offer, some extra other pieces of content to make sure their audience understood it. And of course, when we launched, we had a lot of people joining right away. And that's how it went. It was a really cool system. Then the most important thing was, okay, how do you not actually scale this long term? Because it's awesome that you were able to make a offer like this scale one time, yeah, but how can you repeat this result? How can you actually scale this long term? So the most important thing is that the ecosystem becomes self-sustaining, meaning that after Well, let me break down that term for just a moment. When I say self-sustaining, I'm not saying it magically will create sales without creating content or anything like that. But the whole point is that the ecosystem kind of creates this positive loop of consistent growth, so that every time Caroline would be creating new content or new offers, we could integrate them seamlessly, because our ecosystem is so well centered around healing trauma, around helping others heal from trauma, that any offer we introduce that is in line, that has been researched, like based on the entire ecosystem model, it would flow quite well. And so by doing this, the mini course would again continue generating revenue as an entry point. The podcast would grow in listenership and influence, would make more people aware about trauma. They would then get to the mini course, and then from the mini course, they would go to the waitlist on a mid-ticket product, meaning the future launches could be executing with more efficiency, and the community grows, more positive results, meaning more people learning about it, which meant we could create a flywheel. Each component reinforced each other, meaning that when we had a good offer and we created our ecosystem around it, we could optimize our mechanisms for nurturing, we could create proper sales mechanisms, and with good service comes testimonials cases. That meant an even more clear ecosystem, and that just kind of does its own thing. And so that's really what we worked on, and to just come back together and really what ended up happening, which is really awesome. So now to jump to the results, we built out her fully optimized ecosystem with all the mechanisms working wonderfully and smoothly. We've successfully stabilized the customer journey from low to high ticket. We introduced Phoenix in February, which launched for $33K in cash, $37K closed in February. Phoenix now has over 1,800 people on a wait list, and we just finished our second launch with about $23K in cash and about $4.9K in consistent monthly recurring revenue, which means we're growing fast. While Phoenix has done over $65K in total. And well, Caroline loves what she does. She's a creator, and her life has changed. And honestly, the numbers are really impressive, as you can see them over here. Here's the community, here's Caroline's page, of course, and the community we're in. But I want to make a really important statement here. Yes, the numbers of this are great. Yes, the results are awesome, but that's not the thing I'm most proud of. What I'm really, really proud of is just the growth inside of the community. When I made the screenshot, we had 79 members. We're about like 90 plus now, but look at the results. Look at what people are saying. Look at how we're able to change their life. Literally, healing is possible. Karen's video resonated with you. The program really helped. Phoenix, she joined a month and a half ago, and she's truly been changing her life. And that's not all. There's this guy who literally had severe anxiety. He struggled so much with literally showing himself online. And he decided, or not even online, just in person. And he decided, you know what? I'm going to make a video of myself, sharing it with the community with over 70 plus people back then. And he was totally doing it. I got emotional hearing about this because we were truly able to change people's lives while profiting from it in a positive way, creating more net positive impact in the world, while again, helping Caroline also scale her business. So this was an amazing, amazing opportunity. And it really shows the power when you properly scale info businesses. So again, this was all possible thanks to the core philosophy, the ecosystem growth protocol that we use, whereby we focus on making sure we had a really good offer for an audience that we love working with, that we could serve. We knew exactly how we were positioning our brand, the right messaging for them. We could implement traffic, nurture them well, convert them, close them, and lastly, deliver an amazing service. And so thanks for coming this far into this video. I really, really hope that you learned how this all works together and how you can operationalize for it. Please, if you're here, take a chance to look at the video of Nicole, because what it'll show you is the contrast between mid-ticket, high-volume, big ecosystem versus a smaller ecosystem focused on a slightly different high-ticket offer, which really focused on converting in DMs. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot from it. So if you're still here and you made it to the end, I really, truly hope that you learned something amazing about this and that this message sticks with you, that making an impact as a operator, as an info business is possible, that you don't have to do it in a way that's particularly scammy or that doesn't really help people, but you can truly make a difference without having to sacrifice your soul in the process and make a profit. And if you're a coach, creator, or an info operator, then make sure to follow me here on YouTube and check out my Instagram, where I post more content, sharing more wins like this, as well as how you can actually go about it. Every month I do open a few spots to help some people and guide them on the way. So if that's you and you're looking for a bit of support, then DM me, grow over there on Instagram, and I can't wait to see you there. Cheers.